if you want a perfectly healthy organic garden, the absolute worst thing you could do is, well, kill all the bugs eating your plants.
Right. It sounds totally backwards.
Yeah, like a completely bug-free garden is basically a ticking time bomb.
It really is. I mean, it completely defies everything we've been taught about maintaining a landscape or, growing food.
Totally.
But when you actually look at the underlying biology of a backyard ecosystem, sterilizing the environment and wiping out the pests is just, it's a guaranteed path to a total ecological collapse.
Welcome to this deep dive. Whether you're, staring out at a patch of stubborn weeds in a suburban backyard right now, or maybe you're an apartment dweller looking at a sunny balcony, wondering if you can grow more than just a sad, dusty houseplant, you are in the right place.
Absolutely.
Today is basically your shortcut to mastering the foundations of an organic garden. And we're pulling from some really comprehensive, research-backed agronomy guides from university extensions, places like Oregon State, Penn State, the University of Maryland.
Right. Really solid institutions.
Yeah, alongside some fascinating historical data on organic farming and step-by-step urban gardening blueprints.
Because the mission here is really to cut through the overwhelming noise. I mean, if you search for gardening advice online, you will immediately find conflicting methods, expensive miracle products, and just a lot of confusing jargon.
So much jargon.
It's a lot. So we're going to build a clear step-by-step roadmap for creating a thriving chemical-free ecosystem right in your own space using methods that actually make scientific sense.
And I think we have to start with the dirt, right? Like before you can grow a single tomato, you have to grow the soil.
That is the perfect way to put it.
We're starting from the ground up because organic gardening, it isn't really about feeding the plant at all. It's about feeding the soil ecosystem that in turn feeds the plant.
Yeah, and that requires a really fundamental shift in perspective. Most people view gardening as a manufacturing process, right?
The assembly line.
Exactly. You buy a seed, you buy a bag of synthetic nitrogen, you put them both in the dirt, and you just force a plant to grow. But the organic approach is entirely ecological. You aren't treating individual plant problems in isolation. You're managing this incredibly interconnected system of soil, plants, insects, microorganisms, water, wildlife, the whole thing.
So let's get into the mechanics of that soil ecosystem because we're really talking about microbes here, bacteria and fungi.
The heavy lifters.
Right. They're often called the Earth's natural recyclers. But what does that workforce actually look like beneath our feet? Like, how are microscopic bugs turning dead leaves into food for a carrot?
Well, it is a highly sophisticated chemical demolition derby happening 24/7.
A demolition derby. I love that.
It is. You have billions of bacteria and fungi in a single handful of healthy soil. And they control decomposition by producing enzymes.
Okay, enzymes.
Yeah, an enzyme is basically a protein that acts as a biological catalyst. So think of a piece of dried straw. That straw is held together by lignin and cellulose, which are incredibly tough, complex molecular structures.
Right, they're stiff.
They're like microscopic fortresses. A plant root cannot just absorb a piece of straw, but a specific soil fungus will release an enzyme shaped perfectly to target that lignin.
Okay, let me unpack this. So they operate kind of like molecular lockpicks?
Yes, exactly.
So they find a specific chemical bond, they snap it, and suddenly that tough physical straw collapses into simple carbohydrates and elemental nutrients that the plant roots can actually take up.
You nailed it. And some of these microbial enzymes act exactly like guided missiles.
Guided missiles?
Yeah, they have a very specific targeted chemical bond they are designed to break. Others operate more like wrecking balls, rapidly dismantling larger, softer particles of organic matter. And this entire microscopic workforce is fueled by composting.
Ah, composting.
Right. That is how you, the gardener, feed the soil.
But composting has rules. You can't just, throw a pile of banana peels and coffee grounds in the corner of your yard and expect magic.
No, definitely not.
Because if you do that, you just end up with a slimy, foul-smelling mess.
Yeah, and what you're describing there is anaerobic decomposition. When a pile of organic matter lacks oxygen, a completely different set of bacteria takes over.
Oh, bad kind.
Well, the smelly kind. They produce methane and hydrogen sulfide, which is exactly why it smells like a sewer.
Yuck.
Effective composting requires an aerobic environment, which means oxygen, moisture, and a very specific recipe of carbon-rich and nitrogen-rich ingredients.
Okay, so the carbon being the browns, like dried leaves, straw, maybe shredded cardboard.
Yep.
And nitrogen being the greens. Fresh grass clippings, vegetable scraps from the kitchen. Exactly how does that balance trigger the breakdown?
So the microbes need carbon for energy, right?
Mhm.
And they need nitrogen to build proteins so they can actually reproduce.
Makes sense.
When you mix roughly 3 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen, keep it about as damp as a wrung out sponge, and turn it occasionally to introduce that oxygen, the aerobic bacteria go into absolute overdrive.
Like a feeding frenzy.
Exactly. Their metabolic activity is so intense that they generate physical heat, like actual heat. A well-managed compost pile can reach 160 degrees Fahrenheit in the center.
Wow. 160. That's almost hot enough to cook an egg.
It's incredibly hot. And that heat is crucial because it sterilizes weed seeds and kills off potential human or plant pathogens.
So what you're left with after that intense heating and cooling cycle is finished compost. It's coarse, dark brown, feels almost peat-like.
It smells like a forest floor.
Yeah, and you use that as a soil amendment to build the physical structure of your garden beds, or you spread it on the surface as a mulch.
Right. But beyond the benefit to the plants, there is a fascinating direct human health benefit to getting your hands in this living dirt.
Oh, this is the part that blew my mind.
Agronomy research highlights a specific ubiquitous soil microbe called Mycobacterium vaccae.
This is the one connected to human mental health. The mechanism here is just incredible.
It really is.
When you're out in the garden, turning your compost or digging a bed, you naturally inhale microscopic amounts of Mycobacterium vaccae, or you absorb it through microcuts on your hands.
Right, and once it enters your system, it interacts with your immune system. It stimulates immune cells to release cytokines, which are these signaling proteins.
Okay.
These cytokines then activate sensory nerves that run straight up to the brain, specifically targeting the Raphi nuclei, which is the area responsible for producing serotonin.
Wait, really? So inhaling this soil bacteria literally triggers your brain to produce the neurotransmitter responsible for regulating mood and easing depression.
Yes,
Uh,
literally. We evolved in constant contact with these microscopic ecosystems.
right, we used to be in the dirt all the time.
Exactly. When we pave over our environment and sanitize everything, we cut ourselves off from a biological trigger that our brains have relied on for millions of years.
That completely reframes what it means to be a steward of the land. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you aren't just improving the soil health, you're participating in a biological exchange that improves your own immune function and mental well-being.
It's a real symbiotic relationship.
But there is a critical warning we have to issue about compost, right? Because more is not always better.
Definitely. It's what we call overloving the garden. People assume that because compost is quote unquote natural, dumping massive amounts of it onto their vegetable beds every single year can only do good things.
Right, like if a little is good, a ton must be great.
Exactly. But doing that without ever testing your soil chemistry can actually create severe nutrient toxicities.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, compost is really rich in phosphorus and salts. If you endlessly apply thick layers of it, those levels compound over the years. Astronomically high phosphorus actually locks up other vital trace minerals like iron and zinc.
Oh, so it prevents the plants from absorbing them.
Yes. Your plants will look stunted and yellow, and ironically, you'll probably think they need more fertilizer.
And when it rains, that excess phosphorus doesn't just stay in the garden.
No, it washes right out.
It runs down the street, ends up in local waterways, and contributes to algae blooms that suffocate aquatic life.
It's a huge environmental issue. And speaking of hazards, we also have to address the extreme risks of using raw animal manure.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Raw or poorly aged manure from horses, cows, or chickens can be a highly dangerous vector for human pathogens like E. coli and Salmonella.
So if you're growing food, you intend to eat raw, especially leafy greens or root vegetables that are in direct contact with the soil. Applying raw manure is just a massive health hazard.
It must be hot composted first to ensure those pathogens are absolutely destroyed. You do not want to mess around with that.
Okay, so building this living, breathing soil engine, assuming you actually have a place to put it.
Right.
But not everyone has a sprawling suburban backyard. If you're in a constrained urban environment, how do you apply these massive biological principles? Like, do the microbes still work on a third floor balcony?
Oh, the biology absolutely scales down. You just have to adapt the physical infrastructure.
Okay.
You generally have 3 options: in-ground gardens, raised beds, and containers. In-ground provides the most natural rooting space, of course, but you are entirely at the mercy of the native soil quality, which in urban areas can be highly problematic.
Yeah, which brings up a totally non-negotiable step for urban gardeners:
Yes.
investigating the site history.
Yes.
If you're planting in an old city lot or even just next to a house built before the late 1970s, you have to test the native soil for lead.
Lead paint chipped off older houses for decades, settling directly into the soil perimeter, and automotive exhaust from the era of leaded gasoline-blanketed city lots.
And heavy metals do not decompose.
Exactly. They bind tightly to soil particles. And adding a thick layer of beautiful organic compost to lead-contaminated soil will not neutralize or magically remove the heavy metals.
The lead just stays there.
It stays there. And root vegetables like carrots or beets, they'll absorb it right into their tissues. You really don't want to be eating that.
In those situations, building a raised bed is the safest way to mitigate exposure. You put a physical barrier-like heavy-duty landscaping fabric over the contaminated ground, and you build a wooden frame to hold fresh imported soil.
And honestly, raised beds offer incredible advantages even without contamination concerns.
Like what?
Well, they drain much better than in-ground plots. The soil warms up significantly faster in the spring sun, which gives you a head start. And you get to dictate the exact composition of the soil web from day one.
Construction matters, though. You can use simple hardware like the Embrace, which, by the way, is a brilliant no-nail system using 4 metal corner brackets where you just slide the wood planks in.
It's so easy.
But the type of wood is critical. You must use untreated wood, cedar, redwood, or even cheap untreated pine.
Yes. Pressure-treated wood is manufactured to resist rot and insects, and it achieves that by being infused with chemical preservatives.
The bad stuff.
Really bad stuff. Older treated wood contains arsenic, and modern treated wood relies heavily on copper and powerful fungicides.
And when that wood is sitting wet against your garden soil for years, those chemicals slowly leach out.
Exactly. You do not want fungicides seeping into the microbial soil ecosystem you just spent months cultivating, let alone moving into the food web of your garden.
Right. And if a raised bed is still too large, containers make gardening possible on concrete patios, apartment balconies, rooftops. Like if you have sun, you can grow food.
You really can.
There are fantastic examples of extreme budget, small space window gardening where people take recycled plastic produce clamshells, the kind you buy spinach in at the grocery store, and old seltzer bottles. They cut them up and use them as miniature greenhouses and pots.
It proves that nature is fiercely resilient. A tomato plant doesn't care if it's growing in an expensive cedar planter or a recycled bucket.
It just wants to grow.
Right. It only cares about soil, light, and water. But when you are restricted to a container or a small raised bed, you have to maximize your yield per square foot.
Which brings us to intensive or block-style planting. Instead of traditional long farm rows with big empty dirt paths between them, you plant your vegetables in tight grids. You eliminate the wasted space.
That's incredibly space efficient.
But there's a massive catch-22 here. Wait, if we cram all these plants together in a tight block layout to maximize the harvest, aren't we just forcing them into a cage match for water and sunlight? How do we keep them from choking each other out?
Well, they absolutely go to war underground.
They do.
Oh, yeah. When you space plants tightly, their root systems intersect. They're competing for every drop of moisture and every single nutrient. You can only successfully execute intensive planting if your soil biology is hyper-efficient.
So the microbial workforce has to be operating at absolute peak capacity.
Precisely. Those guided missile microbial enzymes we talked about, they must be constantly breaking down organic matter to deliver a rapid, continuous stream of nutrients to sustain that extreme density of plant life.
Wow.
Furthermore, you have to monitor the above-ground microclimate. Cramping plants together reduces airflow. Because the wind can't get through.
Exactly. When leaves stay damp because the wind can't move through them, fungal spores germinate. A cramped, block-planted garden with poor soil and bad airflow will succumb to powdery mildew and nutrient deficiencies almost immediately.
Okay, so assuming we have the microscopic engine running perfectly, and we have untreated raised beds or containers filled with rich compost, now we need a strategic seasonal planting plan to ensure this setup actually produces a harvest.
Right, a blueprint.
Yeah, but before looking at seed catalogs, what is the hard boundary for placing a vegetable garden? Like, where can it actually go?
The absolute non-negotiable requirement is sunlight. Vegetables require a minimum of 6 hours of direct, unobstructed sunlight every single day.
Not dappled shade under a tree.
Right.
Not bright, indirect light on a covered porch.
No.
Direct sun.
Why is that so strict?
Think about what a vegetable is. A tomato or a bell pepper is a massive concentrated package of sugars and complex carbohydrates. To produce that, the plant acts as a solar-powered sugar factory. It uses the energy from the sun to strip carbon dioxide from the air and water from the soil, binding them together to create glucose through photosynthesis.
So it's basically bottling the sun.
Exactly. Without intense direct solar energy, the plant simply cannot power that chemical reaction fast enough to produce fruit. It will grow weak, spindly stems, and eventually just fail.
Okay, so what if I only have a balcony with like 3 hours of sun?
If you only have 3 hours of sun, you're restricted to growing leafy greens like spinach or lettuce, which require far less energy than fruiting crops.
Got it. Once you map out your sunlight, you have to choose your crops. The universal advice for beginners is always start small and grow what you actually want to eat.
Don't grow radishes if you hate radishes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you're standing in a garden center looking at seed packets or young tomato transplants, there's often this cryptic acronym on the tag, VFNT.
Ah, yes. That acronym is a code for genetic built-in resilience. VFNT stands for resistance to verticillium wilt, fusarium wilt, nematodes, and tobacco mosaic virus.
These are devastating soil-borne diseases and pests, right?
Yeah.
Like a nematode, for instance, is a microscopic roundworm that lives in the soil.
Yes.
Some are beneficial, but root knot nematodes literally hijack the plant's root system.
They're awful.
They burrow into the root tissue and cause massive tumor-like galls to form, which completely chokes off the plant's ability to absorb water. You'll water your tomato plant perfectly, but it'll wilt and die anyway because its plumbing has been destroyed underground.
It's incredibly frustrating for a gardener, and once you have root knot nematodes or fusarium wilt in your soil, it is nearly impossible to eradicate them without harsh chemicals, which, we are avoiding.
Right.
By choosing a seed variety that has been bred over generations to naturally resist these attacks, you are practicing organic prevention before the seed even hits the dirt.
Let's track the seasonal cycle of that plant. So you prepare your beds in the spring. You plant your VFNT seeds. As summer rolls in, some crops demand a mid-season feeding like a carefully timed boost of nitrogen right as they start setting heavy fruit.
Right.
But the most critical and often totally misunderstood phase of the garden happens at the end of the season. Fall cleanup.
Yes. The instinct for most people in November is to rip out all the dead tomato vines, pull all the weeds, and leave the dirt perfectly bare and raked clean for the winter.
It looks tidy.
It looks tidy, but that is an ecological disaster for the soil.
Because bare soil is highly vulnerable. Without roots holding it together, winter rains wash away the topsoil, and high winds cause massive erosion.
And even more importantly, bare soil starves the microbial workforce we spent all year building.
So what's the organic solution?
The organic solution is planting cover crops, which are often called green manures. As you pull your summer vegetables out in October, you immediately broadcast seeds for crops like winter rye, crimson clover, oats, or buckwheat.
And these plants just germinate in the cold weather.
They do. They germinate and grow a thick protective mat over the soil. The living roots secrete sugars that keep the bacterial and fungal networks alive right through the freezing temperatures.
That's amazing.
And certain cover crops, like clover, are legumes. They actually have a symbiotic relationship with specific soil bacteria that pull nitrogen gas directly out of the atmosphere and fix it into nodules on their roots.
So they're making free fertilizer from the air.
Exactly. In the spring, before you plant your vegetables, you terminate the cover crop, usually by just chopping it down at the soil line, and leave it to decompose on the surface. You've naturally fertilized your soil and protected it from erosion simultaneously.
Which leads directly into one of the most transformative movements in modern organic gardening, the concept of no-dig gardening.
Oh, this is a big one.
Yeah, the central premise is that tilling or aggressively digging up your garden beds every spring is fundamentally destructive. But wait, carbon is a solid, right?
Right.
It's locked in the organic matter, the decomposed roots and compost. How does a solid just evaporate because I turned the dirt over with a shovel?
Well, evaporate is a metaphor for a rapid biological respiration.
Okay, explain that.
When you plunge a rototiller into the earth and turn it up, you are slicing through the intricate microscopic fungal networks that span the soil. But more importantly, you are suddenly injecting massive amounts of oxygen into deep layers of soil that were previously low in oxygen.
Oh, So the aerobic bacteria go into a feeding frenzy.
Exactly. The sudden influx of oxygen hyperstimulates the bacteria. They rapidly consume the solid carbon stored in the organic matter, metabolize it, and exhale it as carbon dioxide gas.
Whoa.
The carbon is literally respired into the atmosphere. You lose your soil fertility, and you actually contribute to atmospheric greenhouse gases.
So the no-dig method just minimizes all soil disturbance. Instead of turning the soil over, you build the soil up. You apply thick layers of mulch-like straw, shredded leaves, or that finished compost right on the surface.
You let the biology do the mechanical labor. Earthworms and soil microbes come up to the surface, consume the mulch, and pull those nutrients deep down into the root zone, creating perfectly aerated tunnels as they go.
From a practical standpoint, this raises an incredible benefit regarding climate resilience. When you leave the soil structure undisturbed and keep it permanently blanketed with organic mulch, it acts like a giant sponge.
It does. It creates a highly drought-resistant environment. The mulch physically shades the soil, dropping the surface temperature and preventing the sun from evaporating the moisture.
Right.
When severe midsummer heat waves hit, a no-dig garden with deep, undisturbed soil structure will survive with a fraction of the watering required by a heavily tilled, bare dirt garden.
And transitioning from struggling against nature to working with it leads us perfectly into design. If you want to avoid the exhaustion of completely replanting a massive empty vegetable plot every single spring, you have to look at principles that make the landscape more self-sustaining.
This is where we get into the realm of permaculture.
Permaculture is a word that gets thrown around a lot online, right? Usually accompanied by visions of off-grid communes and incredibly complex, multi-layered food forests.
Right. People make it seem very intimidating.
But it's actually much more practical for the average homeowner.
Permaculture simply means permanent agriculture. It's an ecological design framework. It emphasizes massive plant diversity, utilizing perennial crops, which are plants like asparagus, rhubarb, or berry bushes that just come back year after year without needing to be replanted, and designing cooperation between different elements of your yard.
One of the analogies used to describe permaculture is incredibly comforting, I think, if you're feeling overwhelmed. Think of permaculture like eating at a buffet.
I love that analogy.
Right. You don't have to put every single item on your plate. You don't have to build a perfectly closed-loop eco-farm on day one. You just pick the specific techniques that work for your life.
Zone planning is a perfect example of a buffet technique you can apply immediately.
How does that work?
Well, in permaculture, Zone 1 is the area immediately outside your door. You place your high-maintenance, frequently harvested crops like your daily salad greens, culinary herbs, cherry tomatoes, right next to the kitchen.
So they're easy to get to.
Exactly. You don't put them at the far back corner of the yard where you will forget to water them or be too tired to harvest them while you're cooking dinner. You literally design the garden around human behavioral patterns.
And one of the most vital things to design efficiently in that system is water management. Because organic soil needs consistent moisture to keep the microbial workforce alive. How you water is just as important as what you water.
Most people use overhead sprinklers, and agronomically, overhead watering is highly inefficient.
It seems so natural, like rain.
It does, but a massive percentage of the water evaporates before it even hits the soil. Worse, it constantly wets the plant foliage. Damp leaves, especially overnight, create the perfect breeding ground for fungal pathogens like blight and mildew.
So the organic standard is drip irrigation or soaker hoses. These are laid directly on the soil surface, under the mulch, and they weep water slowly, delivering it directly to the root zone where it's actually needed, keeping the leaves completely dry.
That's the ideal setup, but the frequency of watering is what really builds resilience. You want deep, infrequent watering.
Deep and infrequent. Why is that better than a little bit every day?
This relies on a biological process called hydrotropism. Roots sense moisture gradients in the soil and physically grow toward them. If you give the garden a light, shallow sprinkle every single day, the soil surface is always damp.
So the roots just stay lazy.
Exactly. The roots have no incentive to grow deep. They stay right near the surface.
And a shallow root system is a weak root system. The first time you miss a watering day during a heat wave, the top 2 inches of soil dry out and the plant just collapses.
But if you water deeply saturating the soil 6 to 8 inches down, but less often, the surface eventually dries out. The plant is forced to send its roots deep into the earth, searching for that stored moisture. It builds a massive, robust root system that anchors the plant and makes it incredibly resilient to drought.
For those gardening on a strict budget, or striving for maximum sustainability, there's also the practice of harvesting local water, like setting up a rain barrel to catch runoff from your downspout, or using a method called gray watering.
Gray watering is fantastic.
Yeah, this is capturing gently used household water, like the water from boiling pasta, washing vegetables in the sink, or even shower water, and routing it to the landscape.
You do have to be meticulous about the products you use if you do this, though. You can only use true biodegradable soaps.
Right, no harsh chemicals.
Conventional soaps contain harsh detergents, heavy salts, and boron, which will quickly build up in the soil and become toxic to the plants. But if you use plant-based, biodegradable Castile soaps, the soil microbes actually break down the soap residue, and the water safely hydrates the garden.
It's all about reducing dependence on external purchased inputs. You can harvest rainwater or gray water, save your own seeds from your best tomatoes to plant next year, and source your mulch locally.
It's so much cheaper.
Yeah. You can collect your neighbor's bagged autumn leaves from the curb, or reach out to local arborists who are often desperate for places to dump entire truckloads of wood chips for free. By doing this, you dramatically lower the financial cost of maintaining the garden.
It becomes an ecosystem that sustains itself. But inevitably, a vibrant, water-rich oasis with beautiful, healthy plants is going to attract wildlife,
Naturally.
including the wildlife we don't want, pests. And this is where the organic gardener faces their absolute biggest psychological test.
It really is the moment of truth. You walk out in the morning, and your beautiful broccoli plants are covered in a crawling carpet of aphids. Or your cabbage leaves look like Swiss cheese because of caterpillars.
It's heartbreaking.
It is, and the immediate modern reflex is to run to the garage, grab a chemical spray, and eradicate the problem instantly.
Resisting that urge is difficult, but the framework for handling it is called Integrated Pest Management, or IPM.
IPM.
Right. IPM requires you to suppress your panic and approach the garden like a scientist. The very first step is identification. You cannot fight an enemy you haven't identified.
Because many bugs in the garden are completely harmless.
Yeah.
Or they're actively beneficial predators. Like, you might see a terrifying looking insect that is actually a lady beetle larva aggressively hunting aphids.
Exactly. Once you positively identify a pest, the second step of IPM is assessing the threshold of damage. Is the damage actually unacceptable?
Right. A few holes chewed in the outer leaf of a kale plant doesn't mean the plant is dying. It just means you have to share a fraction of your crop with the ecosystem.
If the damage is severe enough to threaten the harvest, you still don't reach for a spray. You start with physical and biological controls.
Like what?
You use physical barriers like floating row covers, which are these lightweight breathable fabrics that let sun and rain in but keep moths from laying eggs on your cabbage. You utilize companion planting, putting strong-smelling herbs like garlic or marigolds near susceptible crops to mask their scent and confuse the pests.
Only as an absolute last resort do you look at organic pesticides. And I think we have to pause here to address a massive misconception.
Oh, this is so important.
There is a dangerous assumption that if a pesticide is labeled natural or certified organic, it is perfectly safe for humans and the environment.
Organic origin does not equal safety. Organic simply means the compound is derived from natural sources rather than synthesized in a lab. But nature produces some of the most toxic substances on Earth.
For example,
Take sulfur dioxide, for example. It is used in organic farming to control severe fungal outbreaks and mites.
but sulfur dioxide is a highly reactive gas. It's actually listed under California's Proposition 65 as a reproductive toxicant. The EPA classifies it as a criteria air pollutant linked to severe respiratory issues like asthma and significant risks to fetal development.
And the most alarming aspect is the mechanism of toxicity. Because sulfur dioxide is a small, highly reactive molecule, it easily crosses cellular barriers.
So it gets into your system easily.
Yes. Unlike many complex synthetic pesticides that require a specific dosage to cause systemic harm, there is no known safe threshold for sulfur dioxide exposure regarding developmental risks. Even microscopic concentrations can disrupt cell differentiation in a developing fetus during critical developmental windows.
So even organic sprays carry immense risks. When absolutely necessary, IPM favors lower risk biological alternatives. Things like kale and clay, which you spray onto the leaves to create a powdery physical barrier that insects hate walking on. Or spinosad.
Spinosad is fascinating. It is a compound derived from the fermentation juices of a naturally occurring soil bacterium.
Okay, so how does it work?
When a caterpillar ingests spinosad, it binds to specific receptors in the insect's nervous system, causing it to fire continuously. The insect experiences rapid muscle twitching, exhaustion, paralysis, and death.
Wow, so it's very targeted.
Very. It is highly effective against chewing pests, but relatively safe for humans.
But the overarching theme of IPM and organic gardening in general is this. Do not try to eradicate every single pest. Do not strive for a sterile garden.
And there is a profound ecological reason for that, known as the vacuum effect.
The vacuum effect.
Yeah. If you use a broad-spectrum organic spray, like pyrethrin, and you successfully wipe out every single aphid on your roses, you feel victorious. But you have just created a sterile, highly vulnerable environment.
Because you didn't just kill the aphids, you removed the food source for the entire security team.
Exactly. The beneficial predators, the lady beetles, the lacewings, the parasitic wasps rely on a steady supply of pests to survive. When you kill all the aphids, the predators either snarve or fly away to find hunting grounds elsewhere. You have completely emptied the ecosystem.
This is where the biological math works against you. Consider the reproductive cycle of an aphid. Many aphid species undergo parthenogenesis, meaning females can clone themselves without mating.
It's crazy.
They're essentially born pregnant, and they mature in a matter of days. A lady beetle, however, requires weeks to transition from an egg to a larva to a pupa to a hunting adult.
So when the next wave of aphids inevitably blows into your garden on the wind a week later, they land in a paradise. There are 0 predators left.
A completely undefended buffet.
Exactly. Because the aphids reproduce exponentially faster than the lady beetles can reestablish their population, the aphid numbers boom completely unchecked. The secondary infestation is 10 times worse than the original one, all because you tried to achieve total control.
So maintaining a low, manageable population of pests is absolutely required to keep the beneficial predators fed and stationed in your garden. You basically need the aphids to keep the lady beetles on the payroll.
That's exactly it. One highly effective strategy for managing this balance is planting insectary strips.
What are those?
These are dedicated borders of flowering herbs like dill, fennel, cilantro, or yarrow mixed right into the vegetable beds.
And the tiny umbrella-shaped flowers on those herbs are perfectly sized for the microscopic mouthparts of parasitic wasps and other beneficial insects, right?
Yep. They provide critical nectar and pollen to feed the predators during the times when pest populations drop. It sustains the security force when food gets scarce.
Ultimately, organic gardening demands a profound psychological shift. You have to realize that tolerating limited cosmetic damage to your plants is not a sign of failure or negligence. It is the visible evidence of a healthy, functioning, balanced ecosystem.
It's a hard shift for a lot of people to make.
Yeah. Navigating all these complexities, the microscopic soil enzymes, the heavy metal testing, the ruthless underground root wars, and the delicate balance of predator and prey. It leads us to the broader reality of what it actually means to grow organically, both historically and economically. Because wait, if I do all this perfectly, if I build the soil, manage the moisture, strictly follow IPM, why do the guides still warn that failure is inevitable? That feels like a cop-out for bad farming.
I know, it feels that way because we are conditioned by the grocery store. We expect uniform, perfect produce on demand, regardless of the season.
Right, apples all year round.
Exactly. But agriculture is an open-air biological experiment subject to chaotic variables. To understand this, it really helps to look at the history of the organic movement.
Many people assume organic farming was invented by the hippie counterculture in the 1960s, but its roots go back to the 1890s. As a direct scientific and philosophical response to the dawn of industrial chemical agriculture.
Yeah, the term organic in an agricultural context was actually coined in the 1940s by an English agriculturalist named Lord Northbourne, Walter James.
Okay.
He didn't use the word to describe the lack of chemicals. He used it to describe the farm itself as a single, complex, living organism, an organic whole, rather than a factory floor where you just plug in synthetic inputs to get an output.
And that philosophy was heavily popularized in the United States by J.I. Rodale.
Right. It has a deep, scientifically respectable provenance. Today, organic farming is a massive global industry. But when we examine the economics and the sheer human labor involved, a stark contrast emerges compared to conventional farming.
Agronomy data, parsing 40 years of agricultural studies, reveals a pretty complex financial picture. The data shows that organic farming is, on average, 22 to 35% more profitable for the farmer than conventional chemical farming.
Which sounds like an absolute triumph for the organic method.
It does.
But the catch is why it is more profitable. Organic farms generally have a yield gap. They produce less total food per acre than conventional farms. The profitability is almost entirely driven by the 30% price premium that consumers are willing to pay for certified organic crops at the grocery store.
So the profit margin relies entirely on the consumer valuing the method enough to pay more.
Yes, and they have to pay more to subsidize the brutal reality of the labor involved. We read a deeply poignant account from a writer named Nathaniel Johnson who grew up on an organic farm.
Oh, that was a tough read.
It was. He described watching his father pour his entire physical and mental being into the soil, working exhaustively, only to watch the crops, quote, die on him year after year due to uncontrollable blights or weather.
On a conventional farm, if a massive weed problem emerges or an insect swarm arrives, the farmer can hire a crop duster or drive a massive tractor and spray hundreds of acres in a single afternoon. The synthetic chemicals do the heavy lifting.
But organic farming requires relentless, daily physical presence.
You are constantly pulling weeds by hand, monitoring moisture, anticipating pest cycles, adjusting to the weather. The mental load is exhausting.
And that reality scales directly down to the home gardener. The university extensions do not sugarcoat this. The ultimate truth of the organic garden is that it does not promise control.
You can't control a freak late spring frost that kills your tomato seedlings.
No.
You can't control a weeks-long drought or a sudden influx of hornworms. Occasional heartbreaking crop failure is simply part of the deal when you refuse to use sterilizing chemicals.
It is.
I think acknowledging the emotional weight of that reality is incredibly important for anyone listening. It removes the pressure of perfection. If professional organic farmers people who have dedicated decades of their lives to mastering soil biology and permaculture still watch their crops fail sometimes because nature throws a curveball, then your wilted cucumber plant is not a personal failure.
Definitely not.
It's just nature batting last.
Which raises an existential question. If it requires so much intense labor and if the risk of failure is higher, why do it? Why not just use the synthetic fertilizers and the chemical sprays to guarantee a harvest?
What's the payoff?
The answer lies in the long-term survival of our soil and our climate.
Because industrial chemical farming treats soil like an inert sponge. Over decades, the synthetic salts degrade the soil structure, and the heavy tilling releases massive amounts of sequestered carbon into the atmosphere.
But the organic methods we've discussed, the compost enzymes, the no-dig undisturbed soil, the deep roots, the biological diversity, they actually rebuild the soil structure.
They heal it.
Exactly. They draw atmospheric carbon down and lock it deep in the earth. It is a method of long-term survival, not short-term perfection. You are building a resilient ecosystem that can withstand droughts, absorb heavy floods without washing away, and sustain life generation after generation.
As we wrap up this deep dive, let's look back at the journey we've taken today. We started by looking microscopically downward, realizing that the real agricultural work isn't done by us. It is done by bacterial enzymes breaking molecular bonds in our compost piles.
We learned the critical importance of building untreated raised beds to protect our food from heavy metal contamination, and how block planting creates fierce underground competition that demands pristine soil health.
We explored the permaculture buffet, learning how to use zone planning, deep watering, and harvesting rainwater, or gray water, to reduce our labor and build drought resilience. And we confronted the difficult reality of the pest vacuum effect, learning to tolerate aphids to keep your microscopic security guards employed.
And before we sign off, there is one final provocative thought built upon the science we've discussed that we want to leave you with.
Yeah.
We explored how the age-old practice of digging and tilling the soil fundamentally destroys fungal networks and triggers a rapid bacterial respiration that evaporates soil carbon into the atmosphere. This realization birthed the entire no-dig movement.
Plunging a spade into the earth is the universal symbol of human agriculture. It's depicted in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. It has been the foundation of how we feed ourselves for thousands of years. But if that very act, the most fundamental, unquestioned agricultural tradition in human history, turns out to be fundamentally destructive to the soil's ecosystem and our global climate, what other deeply ingrained, quote-unquote, traditional human practices might we need to completely unlearn to actually live in harmony with the natural world?
It's a paradigm shift. It forces us to question every assumption we have about dominating the landscape.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. We hope you feel equipped to look at your backyard or your balcony, not as a factory floor, but as a living, breathing web. Get your hands dirty, breathe in those soil microbes, and remember, the absolute best time to start building your soil ecosystem is right now. See you next time.